Okay, welcome. Testing. Okay, welcome everyone tonight. I'm going to be moderating the panel, and these three men will be answering the questions. So I did not come up with these questions. I just arranged them kind of into categories from what the committee had given. And I kind of saw three themes in the questions, and so I'm going to kind of go through them in that way. One theme that we had from these questions is brotherhood, and another one is relating to the world and worship. So there's some questions that have to do with those categories tonight. For the panel, I'll be asking these questions, and I'll probably refer to one of you to kind of start and be the first to answer the question. But that doesn't mean that none of the others can answer. So think about it as a conversation between you guys, and bounce off ideas off of each other without me needing to prompt you necessarily. I won't be asking you after the initial person. I won't necessarily ask you. Sometimes I might ask you to all answer one or whatever, but we would like to hear from each of your perspectives on these questions. For starters, I just want to have you answer an icebreaker question just to kind of get things started here. What is your favorite way to serve the church? And if you could all answer this, and we'll start with Gene.
Probably not like this. Well, most of you know me. I do enjoy serving, but I don't like to be the foremost person. I'm content to do the behind the scenes, but something I really do enjoy is, if there's a responsibility or you're part of some board or whatever you're asked to serve in the church, when there's a group of you that work together and there's enthusiasm and you're pulling the same yoke, so to speak, in the same direction. I enjoy that. Just making the organization a better place for everybody. So I can enjoy that.
I guess I can echo what Gene said in the beginning as well. This is probably not ideal for me as in the serving. But as something that I thought of is sometimes it's almost, I do enjoy as much as anything, just putting your heart into every bit of, even if it's not big responsibility, just it's fun putting your all into it and making it go really well. Just, putting your whole effort into every bit of little maybe service you can. I think it's kind of enjoyable to see people respond when it doesn't feel like it's really a big deal.
So I guess I can say I definitely prefer not to be up front either. I'm not a fan of being in front of crowds, but I guess honestly, I probably enjoy serving most what I do. I really enjoy tech and figuring things out, and I'm able to run the sound system, install new systems, and kind of troubleshoot things there. And it's really fun, especially when I can do that in a way that serves others. I really enjoy that.
Well, thank you for your willingness to do this, even though here that it's not your favorite thing. For those of you sitting out there, I'm sure you all enjoy this part. So we all take our turns. I always enjoy these panel discussions. But okay, so the first category here that we want to talk about or ask questions on is maybe the category of brotherhood. That's what I'm calling it. A couple of questions here are going to be mentioning brotherhood. And so I'd like to just start with What is your definition of brotherhood? How would you define brotherhood? And if you could maybe give us an idea of what you see as a definition of brotherhood. And we'll start with Zach.
Yeah, I guess the definition of brotherhood. I guess when I think of brotherhood, I really think of a community of people who believe similarly. It's not like we all have to believe exactly the same, and we choose to do life together. Choose to spur each other on, to hold each other accountable, to just better each other through challenge each other. So.
As I was thinking of this question, I guess to me it's a term we use when we refer to you, all of you together, people of the same. We use it when we talk about our fellow believers, when we talk about those that we associate ourselves with in the same beliefs, maybe, and practices. After Jesus left, it seems they started using that term more often. In the book of Acts, they started referring to the church as brothers. And that's, I think, that's kind of how I view it. We're brothers and sisters. We tend to use the word brotherhood to refer to both genders.
When it comes to brotherhood, I'd say we're kind of all ish have the same ideas up here. But for me, it was more. I would thought down the line of people with like-minded or a common interest. And we use it in a church as because we're all part of the family of God. So I mean, if your family, your brothers are your family. So that's kind of where I went with it. And I like a group of. I just have a note down here: a strong bond of like-minded people, or people with a common interest.
Okay, now that we've heard kind of a definition of what brotherhood is, how important is it to be a part of a brotherhood, and why? I'd like to hear the why behind your answer too. So again, how important is it to be a part of a brotherhood? And we'll start with Jabin.
I think the short answer is the most important. You could probably just end with that, but Vernon, you asked the why. I think it's because we, on our own, if we're just by ourselves, I don't think we're going to grow much stronger. I think it's important to have people to challenge you where you are in life, and if they do see something that is probably not ideal, I think it's very important for them. As a brotherhood, why it would be important is just to point that out in your life. I think if sometimes you're blind to your own problems, I guess, and I think it's a good place to come together and get stronger together and grow closer to God.
I think as I get older, brotherhood has probably become more important to me. Not sure. It's kind of a hard question. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer, but as you read the Bible and you obey the Bible, how would you do some of God's commands without a brotherhood? I mean, there's a lot of doctrines and ordinances to follow. Feet washing with my wife would be different than with the brotherhood. So how do you obey all God's commands without a brotherhood? something I thought of, and as I get older, I see that more and more. Something also the brotherhood does, it shows us our different gifts. How do you exercise your different gifts when it's you, yourself, or one other person, right? So it's a great way to exercise the gifts that God blesses us with. And I believe if we're with brotherhood, those gifts, God will give them to different people, and they're meant to complement and to make the experience of serving God more fulfilling.
Yeah, I'd say I'd pretty much echo what's been said. I believe it's very important. I think God created us to be relational beings, and without a brotherhood um, to have that relationship with, honestly, I think that's a big cause for things like depression and anxiety in our world today. Is people don't have a community, they don't have a brotherhood to tie into. And I don't think, um, I think without a brotherhood, we wouldn't know um, as quick what our faults are, what we need to work on, what we need to do to better ourselves. And I think that's where, the brotherhood comes in. Is it's we kind of sharpen each other to, I've rubbing shoulders with other people will definitely makes you realize um, how human you are and where you need to change.
Thank you for those responses. One of the things we can all probably agree to is the fact that brotherhood takes commitment. It takes energy, it takes time, it takes an attitude of service. And so, this next question: how do we deepen our commitment to brotherhood in voluntary service? How do we get people, young and old, to give of their time? So, again, we're thinking about deepening our commitment to brotherhood through service. Maybe if you're young or old, giving their time. Let's go with Zach to start.
Something I had to think about is in our world today, we're so individualistic, um, especially the culture around us. And even in our church, some of the young, or in our churches, I should say, the young people are very individualistic. They kind of go about their own lives. And I wonder how much is of a commitment to brotherhood is taught anymore, or even a commitment to, or how much is how much we're losing a concept of us being part of a different kingdom, and that we need to be committed to that kingdom. And I think maybe teaching more of that, and less individualism would go a long way in people committing to voluntary service if they see the bigger picture of the kingdom of God.
Where that when I read that question, my mind instantly went to teaching the I guess just teaching to be plugged in where you are, and just to have a deep walk, close walk with God, because I feel like if you're in tune with God and God calls you somewhere, I think you can heed God's call a little I don't know if easier is the term or not, but I think if we just try to help each other have a closer walk with God. And something else I thought of was sometimes I don't know if it's just me or if it's kind of the feeling, but sometimes I almost get the feeling that I guess VS or voluntary service is a check mark, a box to check and keep going on about your life. And I don't, voluntary service is very important. And I think sometimes it just almost seems as a thing that young people can go do and then come back and continue their life from there. But I think it's if we learn to just plug in even when we're not technically on the mission field, I think everywhere we are is a mission field.
So I would agree with, like Zach said, there's very little commitment, or we don't want to be tied down. And the question is, how do we deepen our commitment? One simple thing that I see is, why don't you add to the brotherhood instead of always take? I think that would, for me, when I plug myself in and actually contribute instead of always being a taker, that helps. That helps me to serve better. And the question is part of the other question is, how do we get more people, young and old, to give of their time? I'm not sure. I mean, when the parents are plugged in and serving and giving, the children automatically learn that, I feel. So that's an easy way to teach them. Just be plugged in. I'm not sure about the older people. Sometimes you hear an older person kind of, maybe they are relieved of their work responsibilities and they're not quite sure where. I think, maybe doing some service or filling God's kingdom somewhere will bring them fulfillment as well. So, yeah, the biggest thing I thought was you often hear people say, well, they're just glad they can come back to the church in times of trouble. I'm like, why don't you add something yourself once instead of always taking? And that's just a challenge I leave with myself.
Yeah, thank you again. I appreciate the focus there on being plugged in where you're at. Maybe we've been talking fairly ideally so far, what we think the brotherhood should look like. This next question is bringing it home to our own brotherhood. And I'd like to hear from all of you, so any of you can start. What's something our brotherhood is good at, and what's something we should improve in?
I'll start so that I don't run out of ideas. We're really good at food and fellowship here, I think, which is a good thing. I'm okay with that. We've had that discussion around the men's table. It's went home to the ladies, but we like to have food every time we have a service pretty well, except tonight. I don't think we do. Another thing I think we're pretty decent at is, although I think we maybe struggled a bit ago, but when people come here to visit, a lot of people go talk to the visitors, I've noticed. We try to make them feel at home and friendly, and I believe some of that stems back to when Ken Yoder stood up and said, we're not a friendly church. And so I think we improved. We do better now from what I can see. And I'm not quite sure where we can do better at. I'll let Zach or Javen tell you that, where we're bad, where we're not so good at. I have an idea. I might share it later.
I guess it's a good sign, but it took me a long time to think and come up with something that we struggle with. And several things came to my mind pretty much instantly when it said the question. I forget exactly how it says. It pretty much says what we're good at, and I think Gene kind of took my idea, I guess. I had just the word community here. I think coming from Pennsylvania to here, it felt like all we do is do church gatherings. Felt like it feels like the only people you ever see every weekend is the church. But I think there's a lot of good in that, because you start seeing each other on more personal level, and you start getting comfortable around each other, which in other words should be easier to share than when we're struggling with something. But then the thought that the one word that just kind of jumped out to me tonight when Zach was, I forget exactly what he was talking on, but I think we could probably do a little better on accountability, true accountability with each other. And I don't have the answers how to do it better or have a bunch of accountability groups. I know we tried that and that didn't go too well. But yeah, that was kind of one thing that I thought of, that do we have deep talks of things we're actually struggling with maybe. But yeah, what I said earlier, I do believe the community aspect of it is really, really good.
I don't know that I have much more to add. They pretty much said what I was going to. I just had down that we really enjoy each other, and I think that's true. We do a lot of stuff together, and that's great. I guess the word that came to mind when I was thinking of what we can do better, and this might sound counterintuitive to what I just said, but I put down connection. And I guess kind of what I mean by that is how much do we really know how our brothers and sisters are doing spiritually? Yeah, just kind of down the same line of what Jay was saying. Do we have those deep conversations? Do we share our struggles? Are we willing to go up and just simply ask a brother how he's doing on a spiritual level? I do think that's something we could probably do a bit better at.
I'd like to hear from you, Gene. Yeah, what's that lingering?
I don't really see it as a big problem here, but there would be room for improvement in our singing. I don't think that's really a secret. I think we do a lot better than we used to do, but we're maybe not so much a singing congregation, and so there's room for improvement, no matter which way you look at it. And when we all pull together, sometimes we really we get into it, and the next time we're all half looking out the window, and the song leader's bravely trying to lead the singing.
Something that came to my mind as we're sitting here along the lines of something we do good at, and this is something coming in, I guess, is something I noticed, is the connection between the I don't know, I guess middle age to older people and the youth group's really cool to see. Feels like there's relationship there, and I think that's very, very valuable. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lot more valuable than sometimes we think.
Thank you for that perspective there. It's probably one of the harder questions to answer. Okay, these next two questions are also probably more practical. We were thinking about how brotherhood is lived out. In an ideal world, everything would be sunshine and roses, but oftentimes brotherhood is hard. We all have weaknesses, we have hurts, we have emotional scars, but it can be hard to let others see the real me. Maybe we are afraid of how people will react, or maybe we just have been hurt too often. Maybe we are afraid of being the only one struggling or being judged for what we are going through. This can be especially hard when some sins seem a lot more gross than others. And so this question is, what are ways that we can make people feel safe to get help with sexual addictions? How do we make finding victory over unwanted sexual behavior part of normal discipleship, like greed and envy and gossip? And along with that, a similar question: how can we make people feel safe to find victory over depression or suicidal thoughts? And we'll go to Gene for this one.
Tough question. Not sure I have the answer really. I had to think about this for quite a while. Asked my wife and my two oldest children, and how do we make people feel safe to get help? Is kind of how I looked at it, more than actually like working with the sexual addiction or the suicidal thoughts. But how do we make it a safe place? It's kind of how I read the question. Not really sure who was asking it. I'm hoping that's what they were looking for, but in my opinion, for the whole church to be able to work on this is not possible. Like you got to pull out of the church people that have that gift. If you understand what I'm saying, the church wants to be a safe place, but to have a discussion with somebody that, or to help somebody that has an addiction like this or is struggling with depression, I think of words like trust, confidentiality. It seems like when you work with things like greed and envy, it is a sin, but it's a different sin. The Bible literally refers to sexual addictions as a sin against the body itself. It names it as the only sin that is like that. So it's a deep, heavy subject. I've really not had to work with people like that, so I'm kind of in unknown territory. But it feels like when there's a problem, hopefully there's 2 or 3 brothers or sisters that can come forward and provide that safe place and be a mediator between the person struggling and the church, so to speak. And I think within that little group, there needs to be vulnerability among all of them. They all share their struggles together. Probably also a good thing to think about would be, if you provide a safe place, you have a plan. You have a plan to towards restitution back towards God from the struggle or the sin. Accountability, some type of accountability where it can encourage and bring the struggling one back to Christ, I guess would be some of my thoughts.
Yeah. I wasn't completely sure how to answer this either. I think Gene brought up a lot of good points. I think with these sins, whether it's sexual sins or even just depression and suicidal thoughts, there's a much greater level of shame to it than, let's say, pride or just general selfishness. And I think we definitely need a safe place for people to come forward with it, because it obviously silence just compounds shame. I'm not sure. Somehow, if we could somehow shape the conversation to let people know that it's okay to come forward, and talk about those struggles. And I really do think, I do like the idea of having those 2 or 3 people in the church who work with who are willing to work with them and hear their struggles, make them feel heard, and to try to bring them back to a place of redemption and restoration.
Thank you for those responses. Probably a heavier question here.
Something I forgot to say, the question also says, how do we make finding victory over unwanted sexual behavior part of normal discipleship? I don't know how you read, what's normal discipleship? And maybe parents teaching their children. I mean, that's got to be pretty normal. But that's really hard. And some of you older parents can maybe tell me how to do it. It's not always easy to talk about sexual problems or depression, but make that part of your teaching program, I guess, as a parent. And I think that'll be a great start. A couple years ago, I was talking to a man, and my point here is, I talked to this man and he said, years ago, our grandparents didn't talk much about stuff like this. Our parents maybe didn't talk a whole lot about it to me. And he said, I think the generation now is doing a lot more talking about it. So that's encouraging. But he said, guess what? We still have the same problem. So let's not fool ourselves that just talking about it fixes the problem. We need to be intentional and do some teaching in our homes.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank you for wrestling with these questions. You mentioned that, the sexual addiction thing gets talked about more, and I think that is a good thing. And I just, when I was looking at this, and it says about feeling safe for depression and suicidal thoughts, and I was thinking about that. How easy is it to talk about that? It's almost maybe and doesn't get talked about as much as maybe even the sexual ones. And yeah, I think it's an area that we need to be aware of, especially or we could even put in there anxiety and some of the things that are happening there with our young people. So maybe more ideas for conversation after this. All right, we're going to shift gears just a little now and look at some questions that have to do with relating to the world. That was another category. So the first question here is, what does it mean to live in the world, but not of the world? And Zach, if you want to start with that question.
So what does it mean to live in the world but not of the world? I don't know. I was thinking about this, and your mind starts going, well, what is of this world that we partake in, and really, I don't know. Just a word came to mind, and that to me sets you apart from the world, and that is just simply obedience to God and to His word. I think this world is, obviously we live in this world, and we need to take part and at least some of the world's systems to even live. But I think the world is full of rebellion, rebellion towards authority, obviously rebellion towards God, which is the ultimate authority, and just full of sensuality, selfishness, and yeah, to me, just obedience to God, to His word, to living out His word is going to it's going to purge a lot of that from your life. And that's pretty set apart in this world anymore, to live that lifestyle.
This, excuse me. This is one question that for some reason, think about this one a lot. I think it's just because some of the, it's just very important to me that I'm not taking part of the world. But it was a very big, it was kind of convicting looking into this a little deeper. I really enjoy sports, and that kind of that kind of convicted me a lot. If I don't know if sports in themselves are exactly wrong, but it's also not. I don't think it's. I think it's of the world. Um, just because where my brain went with the in it but not of the world, just having different desires, likes, and a different God. For a lot of the world, everyone has a God, if they want to admit it or not, and a lot of people their God would be themselves. But and thinking of this one, I think it's relatively practical when it actually comes down to it. In some areas, maybe that what is filling our free time.
Don't have a lot to add. I would agree with what was said. Things I thought of, like there's verses in the Bible, we are pilgrims and strangers. Don't have a renewed and a transformed mind. Christ taught his disciples in John 17 that he literally says, "You are in the world, but you are not part of the world." And so I think, like Javen and Zach touched on, practically, we do live here, but it helps when I can keep my two kingdom concept clear.
So this next question is related, but it ties back to our discussion on brotherhood. And the question here is, what does it mean to call someone a brother or sister? And you might have touched on it already in your definition of brotherhood, I think. And so tied in with that question, then thinking about who do we call our brother or sister? Who is our brother? What does it actually look like in the world? The question is, do we call our Lutheran pastor neighbor our brother? Or what about Charlie Kirk or J.D. Vance? How do we discern who our brother is? And I'm going to ask Gene to start.
So most of you are glad you're sitting back there. I don't know that I don't have the answer, but I did think of something in the scripture. Maybe I wrote the wrong reference down. Well, I can kind of explain it. I'm not sure what do we mean when we call someone a brother, except to me it's like when we're talking about, like I answered earlier, we're talking about somebody in the same belief system, practice, or church. I referred to you as brother or sister. And do we call our Lutheran pastor our brother, Charlie Kirk or J.D. Vance? I'm not here to make that judgment call. There's a place in the scripture that Jesus' disciples came and said, God, or Jesus, there's these people over here that are casting out spirits in your name. And we're trying to rebuke them because they're not of you. And what did Jesus tell them? He said, let them be. If they're for me, let them be. And that's how I pretty much view my two kingdom concept idea. As if there are those that want to serve Christ different than I'm perfectly fine with that. I feel more safety in a brotherhood like this. And if God's name can be glorified through Charlie Kirk, hallelujah. Or J.D. Vance or somebody in the government. But when I consider our views, separation and nonconformity, non-resistance, we have some differences in some of those names, those people that were named. And so I probably make a difference in calling them a brother or a sister.
Yeah, this was probably the hardest one, honestly, because I don't think we do have the authority to, like Gene said, I don't think we can, or I hesitate to say no, they're not if they are a professing Christian. But yeah, I would echo a lot of what Gene said there. If especially um, we we do have some differences that definitely separates us, but I think it's not really in our place to judge them as being a part of the family of God.
Okay, thank you. We talked a lot about relating to the world and maybe to other people who maybe say they are Christians, and how we relate to people, but how do we relate to people who don't even classify themselves as Christian? Um, how do we still have the mind of Christ in relating to them? And this next question um, is more along those lines. Um, how should we handle people asking us to use their preferred pronouns, they, them, etc.? And maybe the bigger question here is how to relate to the LGBTQ community. Are there principles to keep in mind here? And I know this is a hard one, but I'll give it to Javen here.
Yeah, maybe I spoke a little early on that last one. I think this was the one I spent the most time on, probably. I don't know if it's good or not, but I've not had to deal with this directly. I mean, it's a good thing, I think. But I just want to say no, don't use their preferred pronouns. That's first, my initial thought is no, that is not their gender or whatever they decide. But I think this is tough. As the question, Vernon, you said LGBTQ, and then the pronouns. I would tend to separate them a little bit more. I know they technically are a part of the LGBTQ, but it's a straight up lie if you're a male and you identify as a female. I think that's a straight up lie. And listening to them on their pronouns, yeah, I don't know. I think that you'll find yourself in a very, very scary, very not scary, just a tough place. Because I think we obviously have, if you come into contact with that, I think it would be very important to, in a Christ-like manner, to describe or to explain why you wouldn't use why you would rather not use their pronouns. because it clearly says in the Bible that he created male and female, and you're obviously created. God creates you the way he does want you. So as far as the transgender or identifying with the pronouns, I don't think it would be a good idea to use their pronouns, but I may be wrong.
I had a lot of the same thoughts that Jave did. I do believe those people are living a lie, and I don't believe we can participate in a lie as Christians. I feel like the hard part, though, is that's pretty black and white to me. The hard part is actually knowing how to still relate to them, even if you can't participate in that lie. I guess it's more of a question or anything. How do we? I guess so often it's so easy to just. When I think of a scenario like that, it's often just me saying I can't participate in a lie, right? But how do we actually explain to them what we believe in as non-judgmental way as possible, and tell them that because I believe the Bible, I cannot, in a good conscience, use your pronouns. Rather than, I don't know, it's I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can get around offending them or anything, but to do it in as loving a way as possible. Explain to them why we actually believe what we believe.
Yeah, thank you. I would probably, Javen mentioned in a Christ-like manner and in a loving way. Definitely, I think it's going to go a long way. I have never myself been faced with this, so I'm not sure how I would respond. Um, we don't, when you talk to somebody that's divorced and remarried, you don't go rebuke them to their face, do you? And is it any less sin? And so sometimes I think because it's a new thing, we grapple with it, and probably like anything, as the years go by, we will be more softened by this. We won't think it's so bad. But if it was a scenario where I faced, I'm not sure how I would respond, except a lot of times today, especially the last couple of years, if they would come and ask me, it would really depend on the attitude of the person asking me to use their pronouns. If it's in a belligerent, challenging, argumentative, like, if you follow what I'm saying, they're just out there to prove who they are, and that I probably won't give them the argument. I'll stay out of the argument. If I see that they're actually deceived, and because there are some people that are literally brainwashed coming out of the colleges and the universities and their homes, I think my heart would be like, could I interact with them more often and work towards some type of a coming to the question? Maybe somehow befriending them a little bit, and then definitely, for me, I would definitely use the scripture, because that's God's authority, and more it's what I believe, but it's really God who set the rules, not me. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but I would probably be a little hesitant to get an argument with them right off the first. I would probably feel them out a little bit. What are they actually after? If they just want to fight, they're going to have to fight alone.
Thank you. I think those are very wise words. Okay, we're going to switch gears one more time here to the last subject, worship. And I think I'll go a little bit faster through this. I think we can still do it. For the first one, if you could all answer, and then for the rest, I'm just going to pick one of you, and then I'll just have you, just that person, answer that question. So the first one here, what is worship? So again, maybe we're looking for a definition here from each of you. What is worship in your mind?
When I think of worship, um, I just think it often comes down to obedience. At least that's where it starts, I think. It's just obedience to God, to His word. And I believe the more we do that, the more God will reveal Himself, the more we'll, um, the more the emotions will come at times, the more we'll be in awe of God at times. But I think the core of it is just obedience.
Yeah, Zach was kind of going where my head was as well. Um, it's just something else that kind of came to my mind is something that you just hold so much higher than anything else. You just pretty much in awe of God, um, and all that He has done for you.
I had down, it's just an attitude of reverence, admiration, awe or adoration of, and a great respect for something or someone. You know, you can worship the wrong thing. So it's when you really pour yourself into your heart, your attitude. Hopefully it's towards God.
Okay, Gene, if you want to take this one, how do we prepare our hearts for worship?
How do we prepare our hearts for worship? For me, it's if, like I said, it's a great adoration or admiration of something. And you know, I loved hockey when I was young, still do. But I knew what was happening in the hockey world. Why? Because I spent time. I followed it. And so when I want to worship God, it takes time. There's, you know, if I spend a bit of quiet time with God before I ever come to public worship, I'm already set up. I'm in the mode, so to speak. Prayer. How can you truly worship something when you don't have a communication or a relationship with somebody? And prayer is one way to build a relationship with God. And you need to lay down the cares of this life. For me, I need to just physically take some time and prepare myself for worship. So I guess taking time, prayer, meditating, preparing myself.
We'll just go down the line here. Javen, what does it mean to worship in spirit and in truth? I think these are words from Jesus. Or someone asked Jesus this, I think. What does it mean to worship in spirit and in truth in your mind?
Saying in my mind might not be completely honest. This was something that I had to look into um, looking in the Bible and just different places for this. But one idea, and I guess this is one idea that I came across, and I did like the idea is, in spirit. Before Jesus was crucified, they had to go to a temple to talk or to have sacrifices and all that. So after Christ's death, we could worship Him. We had a mediator to God wherever. It's more of a in your body, um, and in spirit. So it's not like you have to be at a certain location for that. And then in truth was interesting to me. They brought up the idea that, if you're I guess, not worshiping in truth, it kind of feels just like a drug high. And you get all emotional, and then when you leave, nothing changes. And it's just kind of back to it's more of an emotion. But having a true spirit, worshiping in true truth, is true reverence to God, and true connection, that when you come out of a time, I guess, if it's specifically a time, there's a true change in your life.
Thank you. And for Zach, how do you maintain a spirit of gratitude in worship?
I do think gratitude is a choice, and we can choose to be grateful. I don't think the emotions of gratitude are necessarily always going to be there, but we can choose to give thanks regardless of what we may be feeling, you could say. Um, and I think the more we practice that, the more grateful we will become. Just practicing giving thanks or gratitude really does it helps you focus. I mean, it changes your focus. It really does. It changes your focus to your blessings, and not so much your woes.
And this last question here for Gene. How can we learn to live joyfully or have that as an attitude for our life?
I just simply wrote, it's a choice. That's how I view it. It's a choice. I can learn to live joyfully and have a good attitude, regardless of my circumstances.
Well, thanks again for being willing to do this. Is there any last comments that you just wished you would have thought to say?